Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started this week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Roar!
Ruben Bressler.
Wow, that was beastly. Well done.
Did you like that? Was that intimidating for you?
Yes, I'm
Roar.
terrified.
Come get you, get your pouncing
We
on.
did the cats episode already.
But it was pouncing fun. Beast go, all right. It's fine. Who cares?
That's like mildly creepy when
I guess
you do
I
it,
guess I
Evan.
could do the for my
He's
beast.
got the Wookiee. I can't do the
allow
Wookiee.
that.
I've got
I would allow that.
the giant barreling six-legged dinosaur looking thing.
Yeah, we
Well-
default to you when it comes to voices. You are the king.
Yeah, quite beastly.
Mm-hmm.
We also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 reserve list cards. Ruben?
This week we had quite a few entries, as is evidenced by the fact that we couldn't decide on a full list ourselves.
People seem to really like our last episode. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And
feedback.
there were a lot of options left over because we're even considering making another top 10
Yeah.
It
reserve
was so
list
much
cards.
fun. It was so much fun.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
much.
But we did miss like the big cards
Yeah.
that are like why there's so much consternation about the reserved list. So Felipe Riel let us know that definitely one of your best episodes. I was glued to my phone looking at all the amazing, weird, and otherwise awesome and nostalgia-filled cards from MTG's now ancient history. However,
Ancient. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
probably like he's
All
probably
right.
like 15. We don't know.
I know. All right.
However, you brought everything to the table except for the dual lands. And yes, I'll cheat here, as Evan did, and I'll include the whole cycle, because this is it. The OG, the forbidden, most precious lands that any and all MTG players want to possess. I remember that three things filled me with joy during the arena event for Theros Beyond Death. Casting a Black Lotus, casting an Ancestral Recall, and generate mana to cast my spells with an Underground Sea. They are so simply and yet powerful and beautiful. How I wish they were not on the thrice damned reserved list, so each and every one of us Magic players could afford to own them.
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
Well, first of all, Felipe, obviously, thank you very much for
Thank
interacting
you.
with the show. We certainly appreciate it. And contact Aaron. Last week's Twitch winner contacted me because they had already been blocked by Aaron at a different point in time. I can't make it up. Look, but this last weekend at Toy Fair, they announced a
Yeah.
miniature version of a dual deck.
Yeah.
And if miniature cards get around the reserve list, I 1000% want vintage decks that are super tiny and small. I want little bazaars.
I'm
I want
excited
my
to
little
have a
playset of
baby
Tundras.
bazaar.
It'd be
Yeah.
so sick. It's
Oh
like
my
little
God.
little Force of Wheels. Like it'd be
It's a
so
little
cool.
baby bazaar. Just
I think it's still like gangbusters. I swear to God.
Yeah, we'll probably expand on it a bit more during our live show this week. But it just came out of nowhere too. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
what? Like, okay, actual tiny leaders, you know?
Right.
There's this company who like that's their shtick, right? Is they
Mm-hmm.
take something and they shrink it down. They're like the smallest GI Joe figure or whatever. Some other
Honey,
stuff.
I
they do.
Shrunk the Planeswalkers. It's
Yes.
Yeah.
And first of all, that's really good. But secondly, I just love the idea. I don't think, like, if you can't do it, like, you know, if you can't get around the reserve list, I don't think it's worth doing. But if you can, the novelty of being able to say, like, look at my dual land set or whatever would be so sweet.
But you couldn't play them with like full size
you
cards.
couldn't
That'd be
enter
awkward.
an actual. You
Nope.
couldn't go to
Yeah.
Eternal Weekend and be like, "Nice to meet you."
But there's
Cast
art.
Baby Jace. See what I did?
I will talk about it on the show some more.
Yeah.
But like, I just love that.
It
We'll talk
opens
about
up some
sports great.
possibilities for sure.
Yeah.
It really does, because everyone hates the reserve list, and that's a truism. But congratulations once again. Contact Aaron before she blocks you. Like
I
last
know
one.
Felipe. He's good people.
All right. Next thing I know, hey Evan, I don't know how to say this, but she already blocked me. And
Aaron knows a lot of people, and some of them are blocked. So you know,
not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, just
it's a
fact.
fact of life. Yeah.
Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it's time to get beastly up in here talking about our top 10 beasts. some that weren't even beasts when they first
True.
debuted.
There was a big creature type update that turned a lot of creatures into beasts over the history of Magic the Gathering.
It's true. We have, I think it was like 600 or so beasts in Magic
beasts,
right now.
yeah.
Something like that. There was or maybe 360. I'm getting
Of
my
all
numbers wrong.
colors.
A whole bunch, and they're everywhere on everything. There was a whole bunch of really cool creatures that I kind of ran into, and I was like, "Oh, that's a
Found
beast."
Yeah.
388 cards.
388.
Okay.
There we
Card
go.
type that includes beast.
Nice. Well, that means that we're going to kick this thing off. We got some hires. We got some sames. Ruben, do you have a number 10?
I do have a number 10, and it's one of my favorite cards because the numbers are so weird on it. It's always given me joy to play this card. It's also a Pro Tour winning card.
Okay.
And in fact, this card was a dominant force at Pro Tour Kobe in 2004. That tournament ended up being won by Kuroda Masahiro, but there were 5 big red decks in the top 8 of that tournament, and Kuroda was the eventual champion. That deck had 2 different creatures, 2 4-ofs. It had Solemn Simulacrum, and it had Ark Slaughter.
Yeah, I love this card.
I love Ark Slaughter so much. 3 colorless red get you a beast. Nothing else, just a beast. No other
beast.
creature types. It's a rare from Mirrodin. It's a 4/5 for 5 mana and has the following ability. Pay a red mana and exile the top 10 cards of your library. Ark Slaughter deals 2 damage to any target.
It's cute, but I've never seen this before. This is so bizarre.
Oh, this card is
It's
dope.
a strange card.
There was a time, and ever since, it's just like that lauded time where mono black control was a thing, and everyone was like, God, I wish we could just go back to mono black control. And then they made Thought Season Pack Rat. You're like, oh my God, that was the
Right.
dumbest thing we ever wanted. And like, they used to have big red decks where it was Solemn Simulacrum and Ark Slaughter, and Ark Slaughter would exile like 30 cards off your deck just to do the last 6 points of damage.
Yeah.
Because you're getting in there with, Firewalkers? Yoshino Firewalker?
Slith Firewalker.
Slith Firewalker.
I mean, yeah, depending on which version of the deck you were playing, you could play an aggressive version that had creatures, or you could just be playing Pulse of the Forge and Shrapnel Blast and be like, all right, are you at 10?
Yeah.
Activate this 8 times. Yeah, this
was-
card is, and it's weird looking. It looks like a Star Trek monster.
I will say it's nice. You know, I've said before that I don't hate red. I just like seeing unusual uses for it. You know,
Yeah.
the whole thing of like, Force Spike, like that doesn't do anything for me, or Lava Spike. But this is clever. Like, I really like this space.
I wish we had a big red deck that actually worked. I feel like Wizards tries to give the tools for it. It just
Right.
doesn't really come together for whatever reason.
Well, there was a minute there where Glorybringer was the best creature in Pioneer. So, like, it exists.
And during
in some
Theros, you had like
formats.
Gruul monsters. I mean, you needed green to like get it off the ground, but that was all about like the Stormbreath dragons and the big dumb red things.
I guess we'll see. But I got a special place in my heart for Ark Slaughter. That was super awesome. Aaron, what's number 10?
My number 10 is the only hire on my list tonight.
Oh, well, okay then. Well, I got some hires coming up, but I do have a number 10, a big bad Mama Jamma that was a beast from the get-go, which is nice. Stays a beast and can get changed in the great update or whatever.
All night. She's a bad man, Gemma. Just
Well,
as foxy as can be.
This was a card that when it showed up, people could not believe what it did. Just had it, just doing it, and just
dance
making
all the
it
way
happen.
through this.
That's right.
entry in the list.
Come on, Evan.
Because you know what you gotta have for you know what you gotta have in order to make it work. You gotta
I know what
have,
you gotta have.
You gotta have spirit. And
Yes,
it's a
you do.
Spiritmonger, as it were, gets to take all the spirit. When this card showed up, people had no idea a creature could do as much as this thing did. The stats were out of this world for the time period. It's a black, a green, and 3 generic mana for a 6/6, 5 mana for a 6/6. In 2001, blew people's minds with no drawback and just upside. They could not believe it. It's a rare originally from Apocalypse, and whenever Spiritmonger deals damage to a creature, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. For 1 black, you regenerate Spiritmonger, and for 1 green, it becomes the color of your choice until end of turn. I know that's weird, but color mattered during that block, and that's why that was a powerful ability. But Spiritmonger in and of itself, like basically created what you described, the Rock and his millions, the Rock deck. Spiritmonger was always there. Every black-green deck from thereafter either wanted a Spiritmonger or a Spiritmonger type card, and I love this card. It's great.
It's been reprinted a couple times since then and given some really sweet new art there, the adorable new art. Yeah, big fan of this card. It's just, again, you look at the power creep, when you think about what we get nowadays and you look at, what people used to get and what they were happy to get. It's just a very Golgari card. And, obviously I have a lot of respect for it being, a longtime Rock player. This is really the one that started it all.
Yeah, Spiritmonger was the first card I looked at and was like, this can't be real. Like, this is a fake Magic card.
Yeah.
Someone stapled... First of all, Apocalypse was weird because it had the enemy color stuff happening.
Yeah. Right.
But even the other stuff in Apocalypse you looked at and you were like, all right, those numbers make sense. But 6/6 for 5 with 3 positive abilities, that's not a thing that you ever got in any circumstance.
Yeah.
It's true.
And so I played the crap out of Spiritmonger when I was, 13, 14 years old.
Wee lad.
Ruben Bressler had a lot. My Pernicious Deeds and my Spiritmongers were worn to the nubs. I played. This was probably the card that I killed the most people with on the Junior Super Series when I played on the JSS.
Mm-hmm.
And I made I think to this day, my best ever Magic finish in terms of monetary value. Was a JSS finish. And yeah, Spiritmonger just is near and dear to my heart. What an amazing card.
I miss JSS. I really do.
I mean, yeah.
Like, the ability to have a whole system where, you get scholarships and stuff. Like, it was such a win-win. Anyway, let's move on here to number 9. My next 2 are higher on someone else's list. But Ruben, do you have a number 9?
My number 9 is one of my 2 hires.
Oh, I'll handle this.
Aaron, you gotta carry us out here.
I got a good one too. So, in keeping with the theme of me just discovering these awesome cards, kind of like Ruben's number 10, I just discovered my number 9 the other day. My boyfriend has this in his Angie Falcon Raft deck. It doesn't feel black. Like, when you look at it, it feels like something red would have or something even blue would have. But I had to do a double take because I'd never seen anything like this before. And it's one of my favorite mechanics on it. Madness. My number 9 is Muckdrub. And it's just fun to say, Muckdrub. So Muckdrub is 3 colorless and 2 black. It's a creature type beast. A 3/3 with flash. In black? Like, what? When Muckdrub comes into play, change the target of target spell that targets only a single creature to Muckdrub. Yeah. So if your creature is about to be the target of a kill spell, you just flash this baby in and then the Muckdrub takes it for you. And if the 5 mana is a bit much for you, if you don't want to pay 5 mana for a 3/3, which most of you don't, especially coming off of Spiritmonger, you can get all that for 5 mana, you can pay the madness cost of 2 and a black, and if you discard this card, you may play it for its madness cost instead of putting it into your graveyard. So if you're playing Angie, you're playing Bazaar of Baghdad, if you have some sort of instant speed discard outlet, you just go ahead and chuck this thing, you get your flash, and it will take the fall for one of your creatures. This card just does so much, and I had never heard of it up until a couple weeks ago.
I'm sure there's like 8 different things this thing is referencing that I'm not really sure.
Well, the real thing that you want to be doing with Muckdrub is stealing your opponent's auras.
Oh,
when your opponent casts a Rancor or an ethereal armor and you just Muckdrub it. That's the way to...
Just straight Muckdrub,
It's just like a verb or an adverb. Yeah.
It sounds dirty when you get Muckdrubbed, although you are covered in muck.
I have been there.
So,
Oh my god.
First you get mucked and then you get drubbed.
This is a family show.
I take offense that I'm a lady. You get a drub first and then we muck.
Sure, fair.
Yeah. Ma'am, this is a Wendy's. We don't Muckdrub here. That's something
I don't Muckdrub on the first date.
Oh my god. Well, and as this is a planar chaos card for those who don't know, planar chaos is when they went nuts with the different colors getting different things like Damnation in black, which is Wrath of God in black, and then we have Muckdrub, which they also did this thing where they had like 37 really deep, super duper deep references to old cards because it was like the old like cool nostalgia set. So maybe there's like 4 cards this thing is actually referencing that I'm just not getting right now. But it is super sweet, and I'll take it. Moving here to number 8. Again, I have higher on my list. But Ruben, you got a number 8?
I do have a number 8. And it's a card that has been the subject of much debate and conversation and headache and primarily famous for the now infamous clip of Patrick Sullivan going off on ravenous chupacabra for a good 5 minutes. On the SCG tour, and to this day is quite the powerful effect to have on a Magic card.
It's ridiculous.
Ravenous Chupacabra originally was printed in Rivals of Ixalan, which is where Evan and I played our pre-release for loading ready run a little
right.
while ago. Ravenous Chupacabra is an uncommon beast horror. For 2 colorless black, it's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature and opponent controls. Clean, to the point, a little too ubiquitous for Patrick Sullivan's liking back in the day, but fortunately for P. Sully, the metagame shifted in a way that didn't make it completely absurd.
I still don't...
But still quite good.
Right, I still don't recall it even being like... I mean, it was good, but he had really made it seem like it was going to be like the fall of Standard. He made it seem like Wizards had turned a corner in terms of design that they could never come back from. I mean, this card was really hyped up to be the end of the world, and it just didn't really live up to it. Like, no one's playing it in Commander, no one's playing it in Eternal formats. You know, it made a dent in Standard, but it just didn't end up being as bad as people thought it was. And when you look at it in hindsight, it seems almost silly, where you're like, this is the card? You go, okay. Like, I just didn't see it.
I mean, it is the best Necrotal blah, blah, blah ever made.
Yeah.
As I recall, his main point was you can't play a creature that doesn't do something immediately or have hexproof. Otherwise, this card will just make you look foolish. So any creatures, no matter how cool they are or how neat they are, if they don't have a come into play ability, if they don't have haste or something, you shouldn't even bother playing them, because this card punishes you for even trying. So while it may not have necessarily done that much to Standard, it's also kind of a thing that was living in the background of Standard, that if anything that wasn't immediately impactful or immediately giving value, this thing was going to put it in check. It was going to be played a lot more, and suddenly you would look like an idiot. Over time, that didn't really happen. Again, there weren't enough good creatures for you to care about doing that, and so Wizards didn't design any, I guess. And that's a Wizards thing that they can kind of, shape that. And I hope they were aware of it. I hope they were aware of like how crazy powerful this thing could be.
Yeah.
But it ended up being like fine.
It ended up being fine. It still closed off a lot of design space, which I think was another big thing that P. Sully was critical of.
Absolutely. So let's move on here to Aaron. What you got for number 8?
So anyone who knows me knows that I love budget Commander. I try not to spend too much money on a deck, and so I always am on the lookout for affordable Commander staples. And my number 8 happens to be very affordable. If you're playing any sort of green deck, you can certainly do a lot worse than this card. It was originally printed in Zendikar and has been reprinted at least 6 or 7 times. And it goes for about less than $1, which is great. I always feel like I need to kill this the minute it hits the board. My number 8 is Rampaging Balos. So Rampaging Balos is 4 colorless and 2 green. It's a creature type beast, 6/6 with trample, which alone can be terrifying. But it also has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So this gets out of hand very quickly. Landfall being one of those abilities that you don't even have to try to trigger. You're just playing Magic. You're just doing what you would normally be doing. This is also in green, which is no stranger to ramp. So you're probably going to find lands, even if you don't have any. You're probably going to have multiple lands sitting around. And they're going to come with 4/4 green beasts. And so you're going to have this thing by itself that you need to deal with. And on top of that, you're going to have some other creatures along with it that you're also going to need to answer. So card is terrifying. It's affordable. It's good in green. Green being one of the more popular colors in Commander. And it's no surprise whenever I see this card on the table.
This card is the number 1 ranked EDH rec beast. That's in the database.
Doesn't surprise me.
That's normally how I usually sort, like, whenever we do this type of stuff, I normally look at everything with the same creature type. I look at it based on value. I look at it based on EDH rec. I just look at it, alphabetically, so I can see what's in there. And this is absolutely number 1 with a bullet. I was expecting it to be like infinite, but luckily they have printed it a lot, which is good. Because if you put it in historical context, Shards of Alara was the previous block before Zendikar. Shards of Alara was the first block to have mythic rares. So when mythic rares came out back then, it was a big, big deal that they had to feel mythic, because that was the promise, that they felt mythic. So in the middle of Lotus Cobra causing its own stir comes this big giant idiot that looks awesome, reads great, and is like every casual player's best friend, and makes landfall look terrific, which is awesome too. It's a super huge seal bomb. This thing hits so many awesome buttons for the people who care about this type of card.
I like the word Baloth. There are 17 cards in Magic that have the word Baloth in their name. It's not an English word. That's a Magic the Gathering specific term. It's not even in any other fantasy.
It's like Saprolan.
But right. But Saproling has the word sap and ling in it, so like you can kind of get what it is. Baloth has no context whatsoever, but Magic players know what a Baloth is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it just kind of sprang up out of nowhere. And yeah, I feel for the person writing an English paper who wants a cool term for a beast, uses the word Baloth, and then their professor goes, what is this? Why is this in your paper?
No. Most of the Baloths are 4/4s for 4 mana.
A lot of them are.
A lot of them, ravenous Baloth and whatnot. Obstinate Baloth was a thing.
The Baloth cage trap.
Yeah, there you go. Baloth Gorger from Dominaria was always super fun. But yeah, Rampaging Baloth's terrific card. Let's keep moving here to number 7. Ruben, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is another card that was just like kind of ubiquitous during its time in Standard. It's another card that you read and you go, how did this get made? This is too good, I think. I think that it's another one that while it was in Standard for a while and very good in Standard for a while, at the end of its life cycle, people were like, it's fine. But for a while there, Deathmist Raptor was everywhere. Deathmist Raptor is a mythic originally from Dragons of Tarkir. It is a lizard beast, now a dinosaur beast. Originally printed as a lizard beast. But fortunately, when they reprinted it in Commander 2019, it's a raptor, so it's a dinosaur beast. 3 mana for a 3/3 with Death Touch and Megamorph of 4 colorless and a green, the much maligned Megamorph ability.
Mighty
which means
Megamorph.
you can cast it face down for 3 colorless and turn it face up for its Megamorph cost and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when a permanent you control is turned face up, you may return Deathmist Raptor from your graveyard to the battlefield face up or face down. Mm-hmm. This, alongside Den Protector, was the central engine, the card advantage recouping of the green-white and other Megamorph-style strategies. Deathmist Raptor was just all over the place for a long time.
And really took green in a very grindy direction. I think back to those games that I used to call her maternal witness because she had the baby on her hip and her little pouch. And so, when you paired those two together, this gave green the ability to really grind out games. And it just has Death Touch on top of it. So you have this 3/3 beast that can keep coming back. You were playing, a good number of morph cards. And so, these matchups were just terrible and very unique to like that standard. This doesn't really see Eternal play, but for what it was good at, it was excellent at.
Right, and this is a card that like it's sort of designed to be great in the standard format that it's in.
And you didn't even have to try. Like I remember when this card first came out, I remember thinking that it was going to be a lot of work to trigger this. Where it's like, oh man, I'm gonna have to run all of these morph cards, and no, like just the Den Protectors alone could get this thing online.
Like just 4 of this and 4 Den Protectors was all you needed.
More or less, when this card first debuted, like no one was talking about it. No one was excited about it. No one wrote articles like I got to play Deathmist Raptor in all my decks, and I was just like, "Have you read this card? This card comes back for free. Yeah. You can put it face down. You can flip it back up again, which triggers other stuff in your deck. Like what?
Much less
is happening?
If you have multiples in your graveyard.
Oh yeah,
yes, it's just incredible." And like if someone like finally used it and it was like this giant breakthrough, and I'm over here going like, I have said nothing, but this card is amazing ever since I saw it. Oh my God. Yeah. The card's sweet. All right. Let's see here. So that was Ruben's number 7. Aaron, what's yours?
My number 7 ended up being a pleasant surprise. I had been working on a Rakdos Lord of Riots deck for a little while. And when you're playing Rakdos, you have to find things that turn Rakdos on, because Rakdos has that weird little clause where you can't cast Rakdos unless an opponent has taken damage or lost life. So you find yourself running things like Lobber Crew. You find yourself running things like the Alchemist, Thermo Alchemist or Thermo...
Yeah,
so you find yourself just running little pingers like that. But I tried my number 7 as sort of a high-end, top-end card that also could ping. And I was very pleasantly surprised by how this card just got out of control so quickly and oftentimes just turns into a machine gun. My number 7 is Deathbringer Thoktar. So Deathbringer Thoktar is 4 colorless, a black and a red. It's a zombie beast, which immediately has my attention. 3 power and 3 toughness. Whenever another creature is put into a graveyard from play, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Deathbringer ahktar. You can then remove a +1/+1 counter from it to do 1 damage to any creature or player. So if your opponent's running any sort of 1/1s, you ping it, counter, and you're just going. Like, you're just creating this engine here. 2/2s, ping, get your counter back. I mean, I was very pleasantly surprised by how this card just over-delivered and overperformed. And if you're done with that, well, there's your 1 damage, trigger Rakdos. You've got Rakdos out. You're playing black and red where it's very easy to kill things, so you're going to have counters on this thing. And I was just very happy with this card and didn't expect it to do so much work. And it's a ahktar. Like, that's got to be a magic-only thing, right?
I think that's a magic.
Okay.
Yeah, just like with Baloth.
Clever name, yeah.
ahktar Baloth coming soon. This card is dope, and it's from Alara Reborn, which was neat. And they didn't really have a big sort of +1/+1 counter theme or anything. I think it was just like a cool rare essentially. Yeah. But you could really put it to your advantage, and that was really sweet.
Yeah.
There are a couple of combos, I think infinite combos with Deathbringer ahktar. I'm not recalling which ones were if there was one in standard or not. But I know that there was a Deathbringer combo available in, I think it was modern. But Deathbringer ahktar costing 1,000,000 mana, of course it costs 6 mana for a 3/3, and not every opponent is going to have creatures, so it's tougher to trigger it. But
sure.
But yeah, you can combine this with Death Baron, any amount of +1/+1 counter doubling effects.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with Deathbringer ahktar.
Give it lifelink and have Heliod out and play.
Oh my god!
There you go.
So there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. Yeah, that you
The
could
Vapors.
do. Woo, super cool. All right, so for my number 7 here, I have what I can only imagine to be in the Cube Hall of Fame. I have played this card so many times in the Cube specifically. This was a card that originally showed up, goodness gracious, to try to find all the prints of it. Originally it showed up in Onslaught. Now, I came back to Magic right after Onslaught block, which was Mirrodin block. So I didn't really get a chance to play a lot of this in Standard, but I got to play this thing infinite times in Cube. I love this creature. It's cool. It's sweet. When you cycle it, it goes and finds a basic land. So you can reveal it, put it in your hand. Krosan Tusker is awesome.
My number 10.
Nice. Krosan Tusker is my number 7. It is 2 green, 5 generic mana for a 6/5 common boar beast. It has cycling of a green and 2 generic mana, which means you pay that cost, you discard it, and you draw a card. When you cycle Krosan Tusker, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. You do this before you draw, so you get to get the land out, and you get to draw after you get done with that stuff. And this is just one of those cards that it's literally basically in every cube I've ever played. It's had Krosan Tusker in there somewhere. It's super awesome. I appreciate that Wizards has printed it 8 million times.
Including Modern Horizons.
And including Modern Horizons, which is sweet, so we get that in Modern. And I don't think it's actually doing much, but that's okay. Again, me and Tusker, we go way back.
I have fond memories of this card from when I was doing the Community Cup. I was the last person added to the team, and so I didn't have as much time to practice. This is when Vintage Masters came out online, and so I had a week to prepare, and so I immediately, and I'm not really strong at drafting or cubing to begin with, and so I just kept jamming the Madness decks, and there was also I think Reanimate was in the set, so I was just doing this whole thing of you'd cycle it and then whoop, I'll just take a big creature for free essentially. And so that was my bread and butter. And so I cycled a lot of Krosan Tuskers that week. I reanimated them. I discarded them to Wild Mongrels. I had a really, really good time with that card.
And of course, this is one of our Magic Mike's preview cards for Modern Horizons alongside Gilded Light. We were able to introduce this card to Modern.
Yeah.
There you go. I just got nothing but love for the Tusk. Guy's awesome. Let's move on here to number 6. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6 is the last hire on someone else's list.
Oh boy. Aaron, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is a card that I considered from my Rakdos Lord of Riots deck until I read it and I realized that it really doesn't do me any good because of the timing of how its ability goes down. But I still picked up a copy because it was very, very cheap, and it's just so metal. When you think of Rakdos, when you think of the circus, you just think of raw. And no card embodies this for me, my number 6, which is Lightning Reaver. So Lightning Reaver is 3 colorless, a black and a red. It's a creature type zombie beast, a 3/3 with fear and haste. What? Whenever Lightning Reaver deals combat damage to a player, put a charge counter on it, and at the end of your turn, Lightning Reaver deals damage equal to the number of counters on it to each opponent. So there's some catchphrases there, or there's some jargon that makes you think it'd be good in Commander. Each opponent, fear, haste, all of that sort of thing. But look at the art, though. Cyril Vanderhagen, you have this, dinosaur-looking beast with lightning all over it. Somebody's being electrocuted on the bottom left-hand side. If you go on the right, it almost looks like there's another, sword person behind it. This art is very busy and just full of Easter eggs, and there's, these beautiful purples and reds and blue, and it just makes you feel like you're at a rock concert. And, I couldn't really get it to work in Rakdos, but damn it if I don't want to put it in something, because look at it. It's just so cool.
So for those who have not played with the fear keyword,
right,
it means this creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and or black creatures, because that was a thing that existed.
But look
for
how
a
terrifying
while.
it is, though. It's so good.
It's pretty scary. Oh, it's so metal.
Yes, look at it.
This is a Slayer album come to life.
Yes.
We did it. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
There was a minute there where everyone was like, how do we put charge counters on Lightning Reaver, right? Which is
Proliferate, y'all.
Yeah, they were like, oh man, we can play Core Tapper, right? And
Work.
Surge Node or whatever.
Oh
yeah,
God.
people were trying to do stuff with Lightning Reaver, and unfortunately, being a 3/3 for 5, even with all that text, it didn't quite get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks like a ton of fun.
Yeah, super cool. Let's move here to my number 6. Oh my gosh. Wizards, it's weird. It's hard to tell sometimes where their head's at, I mean,
wow.
You never know. And essentially, what are they trying to do with certain types of designs? What are they trying to push? What are they trying to make exciting? These days, we just hear these rumbles of, Wizards is just going to push the envelope, and if they have to ban some cards, they ban some cards, whatever. And so, when you have a card that's printed that has so many words on it, that has so many abilities, there are jokes that say, can you tell me everything this card does?
Right.
Can you tell me without looking the millions of things that Questing Beast does in this world?
Let me try.
All right, let's go. Go, Ruben. Questing Beast. All right, what's it
2
do?
colorless green. Legendary creature beast.
Yep.
It is a 5/5. No,
Nope.
it's 4/4. It's
Yep.
4/4. It has haste, vigilance,
Yep.
death touch.
Got it.
It can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less.
Yep.
When it deals combat damage to an opponent or to a player,
To an opponent, yeah.
to an opponent, you also deal that much damage to target planeswalker that player controls.
And what's the last one that everyone forgets?
Is it like non-combat damage can't be dealt to creatures?
Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented.
Oh, that's it.
Why?
Questing Beast does everything. Questing Beast, first of all, has one of the worst names for a legendary creature I've ever seen. I don't care if it was called Questing Beast in the stories or whatever, the fairy tales. Give it a name. Bob the Questing Beast would be better
anything
than just, wait, this is legendary? What?
Put a the in front of it or something.
Yes, something, for God's sake, because this card, the card's terrific. I mean, it's super powerful. Clearly, they just put every word they could on it to do all the right things. But at the same time, you're like, is this really what we want? Where we just have our creatures do 37 things that we can't even remember all of them just because it's mythic? Because this is what's going to sell a booster pack? What? Ooh. I don't know. It's a hell of a card. It's just... Yeah. I don't know how far we need to push these days, but they push
so many
pretty hard.
tweets in relation to this of people forgetting it does things or people bemoaning it, and it's weird.
Right,
3 heads, but it's a 4/4.
Right, you're just like, well, I'll fog, and they're like, lol, it's got this ability you didn't even know, did you? And you're like,
also
barf.
that takes care of protection because protection prevents damage. That's doesn't
correct.
happen.
It gets through protection,
and it's also got a weird. It's a very obvious safety valve, because Teferi had been so good, and so.
Right. Yeah, and Nexus of Fate, fog decks, and stuff like that, too.
Bob the Questing Beast, y'all. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Bernice, okay.
Bernice.
Let's go here to number 5. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5 is one of my favorites. It's a card that also was reprinted in a Masters set, this one being Vintage Masters. And it got a bit of a creature type update. It has always been a beast, but it got the Elemental Beast edition when they reprinted it. It's also a Pro Tour winner because it, if you didn't have a Wild Mongrel on turn 2 in your Blue-Green Madness deck, you wanted an Aquamoeba.
Yes.
Aquamoeba is a colorless and a blue for a 1/3. It's a creature type elemental beast, but when it was originally printed in Torment, it was just a beast. Discard a card, switch Aquamoeba's power and toughness until end of turn.
I'm listening.
Yeah. So free discard outlet. It was pretty good standing opposite opposing Wild Mongrels because it could stand in front of the 2/2. Then if they grew it up, you could grow yours up. Then they would have to discard again. There was like some cool histrionics that you could do with Aquamoeba. It was a good turn 2 play just to be aggressive because it dealt as much damage as your Wild Mongrel wanted to do on turn 3 anyway, usually. It's just a very good card.
And it gives you an outlet for your Madness cards, which was huge for Torment, of course. It was one of your best outlets.
And I loved her in the new Oceans movie. Just
Aquamoeba?
Aquamoeba, yeah.
Really
See,
good.
I don't get that.
Really good in Crazy
Rich
Rich Asians.
Yeah, I think she had a Golden Globe recently, too.
Yeah, she's in Nora from Queens now.
Yeah, very good actress.
Yeah. Evan doesn't watch TV. Evan doesn't know what's happening right now. It's great.
I got nothing. I'm sorry. I'm sure she's wonderful. I just have no idea who that is. Aaron, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is currently making a splash in Standard. When we went back to Theros, we got to see a lot of our favorite fairy tales brought to life. And even though they, avoided using a lot of the trademark terminology and names and things like that, you could still take a look at this card and know exactly what it was referencing. My number 5 is Lovestruck Beast. Yep. So Lovestruck Beast is 2 colorless and a green. It's a creature type beast noble. One half of it is the adventure side. It's Heart's Desire for 1 green. It's a sorcery. Create a 1/1 white human creature token, which is your bell. This is very Beauty and the Beast. The other side is the beast itself. Lovestruck Beast can't attack unless you control a 1/1 creature. And it's 5 power and 5 toughness. This is very good for its rate. And just so flavorful. You have the beast, you have Bell, you have the flavor text. His mind chose solitude, but his heart disagreed. Like, oh my God. And then the Kev Walker art where you can see Bell kind of in the background, staring back at him. And a lot of people, and I forgot this when I was at the pre-release, it doesn't have to be the Bell token. Like, I remember playing against somebody and the token wasn't there, and I thought I was fine to swing in or whatever, and he was like, I have a random knight. It's a 1/1. And I was like, oh, it's any 1/1. I thought it had to specifically be her. Oh no, the beast will fall in love with anything. Yes. And so if it's a 1/1, you'll take it. So
even itself.
Yes.
If it's a 1/1 itself.
You're currently seeing playing the Golgari Adventures deck in Standard. And it's just a beautiful card, great top-down design, and I just love everything about it.
So it's got one of the best gatherer entries for rules clarifications that says, if Lovestruck Beast's power and toughness are reduced to 1/1, it learns that loving oneself is the first step on the true path to happiness.
Shut up.
And
is that what it says?
Yes.
And it can attack even if you control no other 1/1 creatures. They put some Easter eggs in the rulings sometimes. It's hilarious. True. Yeah, Lovestruck Beast, seeing a ton of play in the Teamer Adventures deck with Lucky Clover. It's also just a good value, right? You just play it on turn 1, then you play it on turn 3, and it's great. Lovestruck Beast is super,
you're right. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes, of course he's right. Cute. I knew that. It was great.
I didn't know. It's bananas.
Yeah, they do that every once in a while. It's a good one.
Yeah, it was really sweet. Lovestruck Beast, in and of itself, telling the tale of Beauty and the Beast is great. I absolutely love adventures.
Tale as old as time.
Yeah, exactly. You got the split cards, the split creatures, essentially, as spells and creatures, which was brilliant. There's so much to like about this. It is a classic tale, wonderfully told through a magic card. They did a great job with this one. It was really sweet. Next up to a card I had forgotten was a beast. And, I'm just, we're just scrolling through, just dop at the dop, as we do with the dancing, a dop at the dop. And I'm getting there, and I went, what? I'm sorry, excuse me? The card's a beast? That card's stupid. This card is a bringer of its own magical archetype. This card is so dumb and ridiculous and silly looking at the same time, you slippery bogle. You're ridiculous. You're freaking, I cannot, this thing's a beast. Jeez. Yeah. Slippery Bogle is a common originally from Eventide that is a blue or a green mana. It is a hybrid blue or green mana. It is a beast, as mentioned. It has hexproof, which means this creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control, and is a 1/1. That's all. 1 mana, 1/1, hexproof, and God almighty, this card is annoying and does really dumb things in a whole lot of formats.
And has launched its own archetype, Bogles, which includes this and Gladecover Scout and sometimes Silhana Ledgewalker or something along those lines. Yeah.
Was given new art and flavor text in Ultimate Masters. It says Ogle the Bogle or Goggle the Boggle, which is a shout out to the debate that happens around this card as to how exactly to pronounce it. And it says, doesn't matter, you weren't going to catch it anyways. And very true.
Lol, which is sweet, but it is Bogle, the slipperiest of
Bogles. Are a not historic, but they appear in role-playing games. They appear in Dungeons and Dragons. They appear in old folklore, as far as I
didn't know that.
There you can get Bogles in. You can fight against Bogles if you want to sit down at the table and goggle some boggles.
I think it's the name of a booze too. I think I've seen it on a wine bottle.
Yeah, it's a wine bottle.
Okay. Interesting. Let's move on here to number 4.
You mean a wine bottle?
Wine boggle.
Wow. Aaron, what's number 4?
So my top 5 are various beasts of different competitive pedigrees. And so Left Struck Beast sees play in Standard. My number 4 is pretty big in Pauper. It sees play in the Tron decks because it's something that has a high casting cost that you can cheat out pretty quickly with the Tron lands. But it also has some additional text on it that is very beneficial to a deck that is using a lot of mana cyclers, like your Chromatic Stars and things like that, and giving them just a little bit of value to push you ahead of your opponent. My number 4 is Fangren Marauder. So Fangren Marauder is 5 colorless and a green. It's a creature type beast, which is 5/5. So 5/5 for 6 in Pauper is very reasonable. Very nice. But it says whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may gain 5 life. Yeah. So all of your Chromatic Stars, your Chromatic Spheres, even if you don't necessarily need the mana, you're still drawing a card and gaining 5 life. And so this pushes you very far ahead of the burn decks. This gives you an advantage over a lot of the decks in the format. And on top of that, it's just a really big dumb body that you can cheat out quicker than you normally would be able to. And so I have a lot of respect for this card. Every time I see it, I'm always just blown away by how much work that it does. And so when I was thinking of my top 10 beasts, I knew that this just needed to be here.
Yep, and it's pure Pauper. It's 11 cents, y'all. So you're not gonna break any banks getting a hold of a place out of this one.
Work.
But it does what it needs to do in Pauper for a green and 5 generic mana. To have a giant 5/5 that's gaining you 5 life when you're sacking those stars and whatnot, it's a game changer in that deck, because that's how you lose, is you lose so much life trying to get to the big mana. Once you get to the big mana, you don't got nothing to do with it. This one, you get to play it. If you can sack something immediately, which is obviously the goal, you get to gain 5 life immediately. You have a monster, you got back in life, you're back in the game. That's how that deck wins. It's really sweet. So, Fangren Marauder is awesome. Let's move on here to Ruben's number 4. What you got?
We talked about this card when we talked about our top 10 cats very recently. This one is a cat beast. Y'all know that I really like it when cards get banned and restricted, and it's really tough for it to happen to a creature, but boy howdy did Felidar Guardian make an impact. Felidar Guardian, 3 colorless and a white for a 1/4 cat beast. It is an uncommon from Aether Revolt. When Felidar Guardian enters the battlefield, you may exile another target permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. This, of course, combos most prominently with Saheeli Rai, which has a -2 ability that allows it to blink Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian then blinks Saheeli Rai, and when Saheeli Rai, well, it makes tokens, I guess.
Right, Saheeli makes a copy.
Saheeli makes a copy of Felidar Guardian. The token, of course, has haste, resets the Saheeli, allowing you to use the -2 again, and repeating the process to make an arbitrarily large number of Felidar Guardians to attack your opponent. Very Splinter Twin style, with a 4-mana creature and a 3-mana combo piece, all at sorcery speed rather than twin, which is a little bit different, but still warranting banning in currently banned in Pioneer.
Yeah.
It's just not the interaction that you want to have. And I try not to hold too much of this against wizards. Like they've caught a million of these like infinite combo things and have stopped them, but you didn't know that because they caught them and they got rid of them. And every once in a while it just happens. And yeah, it took the internet about 3 hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours after the set was fully spoiled, because this was not previewed.
Did not take long.
This was shown in the full on that Friday when they just kind of dumped the rest of the cards out. This just happened to be one of them, and then all of a sudden here come the rumblings, and then this thing is completely busted.
Yeah. I remember being in a car on the way to a GP when the full spoiler came out, and I remember I was traveling with my friend Chris, and I was just looking at my phone while Chris was driving, and I was like, oh, that was in the previous season, and then I was like, that wasn't there, and I was like, well, that's kind of Pestermite-ish. I'm sure it's fine. And then you could see it almost in real time of just like Twitter waking up to it, and then Sam started chiming in and going, oh no. And like, it was fascinating to see it all happen. And then, a short time later, the deck was everywhere, and you were just there. People were trying to find the right version of it. And then it became very obvious that something needed to go.
Usually in Magic, but based on my experience, 3 card combos are usually okay because you have 3 different axes and essentially that could fail or get disrupted. But 2 card combos are often really bad because it's just point A, point B put together, you're dead. Like that kind of sucks. But if I have to have this thing to sacrifice and this other thing to go to my graveyard and this other spell I need to have in my hand or whatever it is, that's the stuff that you can really fight on in different ways. I think. Yeah,
tends to be true. That's why the stations, for example, have never really been super broken.
Right.
Every once in a while, you will get a Vizier of Remedies plus Sack Outlet plus Persist Creature thing that occurs. But you're right. Most of the time, it's very healthy. 2 card combos, on the other hand, almost always you got to catch them before they get loose in Standard.
Pretty bad. That said, Felidar Guardian is my number 8. So let's move on here to my number 4. Here's a card, hasn't been out a whole long time, but has been really terrific, and basically has been a standard all-star from the moment it saw print, is still a $20+ card, is still a 4 of being played in very competitive decks right now. This card is absolutely terrific. It's going to be one of the best, like, just pump all of your mana in it cards forever. It is a Jellyfish Hydra Beast.
Oh.
Hydroid Krasis is a blue, a green, and X for a mythic rare, again, Jellyfish Hydra Beast. It is a 0/0, but when you cast this spell, does not mean when it enters the battlefield. When you cast it, you gain half X life and draw half X cards, rounding down each time. It's got Flample, which is flying and trample. And Hydroid Krasis enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. So if you just pump it in for 4, you draw in 2 cards, gain 2 life, have a 4/4 flying trample. This card is amazing. It is a mythic in every sense. It is a format all-star. We're going to see this thing in competitive decks until the day Ravnica rotates.
This was my number 9.
Nice.
This card is the best mana sink of all time. Well, not of all time, but it's the best mana sink creature. Maybe the best X casting cost creature. Maybe. I need to look at a list.
It's real close, if not the top.
You should go check out our list.
Yeah. But it's absurd. It's very popular in the Nissa stratagems, the blue-green ramp decks that are trying to get as much mana as much as possible. And much like previous X draw spells in the past, like Sphinx's Revelation, Hydroid Krasis draws you into more Hydroid Krasis. And that's the whole point.
Krasis into Krasis is pretty ridiculous.
I will say it's very flavorful. I think it does, all of the X's, I think, do their guilds justice. Yeah. You have Rakdos's Return, which is the burn spell and a discard spell put together. You have March of the Multitudes, which makes lots of tokens. You have this one, which is the Simic thing. And so I think this is just the best way that Simic can do this, is give it a creature that seemed to have some very random abilities. Like a lot of the Simic creatures in that set and in that block, it really felt like they were just throwing darts at a wall, where it's like, we're going to have it flying and like proliferates, and it's just like, it's so yeah, exactly. There's the randomness of it, like just a beautifully done card, very faithful to Simic.
So they took a jellyfish, and they took a Hydra, and they took a beast, and then they all loved each other very much. Special hug.
I like that. The other thing is like control decks got to deal with the trigger before it even comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
So you can counter the 8/8. I'm still gonna draw 4 and gain 4, or vice versa, unless you have Whirlwind Denial, which is specifically why that card was printed. I think.
Yeah, it also doesn't mind being bounced. You know,
Right.
Baby Teferi is an answer to a lot of things. Just sort of, put it back in your hand, or when you had the original Teferi, put it in your library, and you're like, okay, like.
But also know it has some drawbacks, and that ultimately its converted mana cost is 2.
Right.
And so Claim the Firstborn can snatch this guy over and
that Firstborn. What's the Glass Casket? I think is
Can also grab it.
does
Yep.
it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple that can deal with this pretty effectively.
Super sweet. Moving on to number 3. Mine is higher on someone else's list. My final higher. Ruben, what's your number 3?
I love my number 3, and I knew no one else would have it.
I bet it's my number 9.
You think it's my number 9?
I think it's my number 9. My number 9 is higher.
We'll see, because this is a fun one. This is from Urza's Saga originally.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, see? So Urza's Saga originally reprinted a number of times, including Eternal and Vintage Masters, as well as in a dual deck of Heroes versus Monsters, because it is a classic monster. When it made Pro Tour Top 8s in 1999 in New York, it was in 6 of the 8 decks, mostly as 1 and 2 ofs, but it was in there, including in Casey McCarroll's Ponza list that won Pro Tour New York in 1999. My number 3 is Crater Hellion. Crater Hellion is a 6/6 for 4 colorless red. It's a Hellion beast with Echo of 4 colorless red, which means you have to pay its casting cost again or else it'll die. And when it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to each other creature. So it was a board wipe in and of itself. It was able to finish things off in and of itself. It went in a number of different decks, not just Ponza, but also in Sean Keller's Blue-Red Academy deck that took 2nd place, and a number of different decks that utilized the fast artifact mana, things like the Colossus deck and Utility Belt, that were able to power out Crater Hellion. Later on, it became popular in the Oath decks as a way to clear the board, mostly in sideboards. And it's just a really cool effect. They experimented with the comes into play abilities on Echo creatures as, do you want to just play this as a sorcery, or do you want it to finish the game? And this one was able to do both efficiently.
Yeah. This was an important piece of my Zancha EDH deck, because the way that Zancha was built was that you wanted to get rid of every other creature so that Zancha was free to do her thing, so that you didn't have to worry about blockers or anything like that. And so you wanted board wipes that would kill everything but her, because she had 5 toughness. And so you would run things like Languish, you would run Mizium Mortars, and you would run this card, one of like maybe 6 creatures. And so you got a board wipe out of the deal. And then also, if you just needed another body, if Zancha wasn't getting the job done fast enough, you would have a beater that would also be able to play on an empty battleground. And I gained a great appreciation for this card.
Yeah, this card is sweet. It's not expensive. It's not going to be a chase card. It was also one of the original Echo cards, which means the Echo is equal to its cost. Later at Time Spiral, they changed it to where the Echo can be different, which I really appreciated. I thought that was really cool. But at the same time, I think sort of these days, the base cost could be, I can imagine, much lower if the Echo cost is going to be that high. And that would make it a lot more exciting, essentially, if you played 4 mana for that 6/6 that dealt 4, and then later had to pay 6 to keep it. Yeah. But regardless, Crater Hellion, hell of a card. Fantastic. It's sweet. And yeah, you certainly got me. I wasn't seeing that one coming. Aaron, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a very popular sideboard card in Modern. If you're playing any sort of green deck, you probably have room for this card. I've used it myself in Death Cloud. I've also seen it in Ponza decks. I've seen it in Titan decks. I've seen it in Jund. It's just a very, very good card. It does a lot of things that line up very nicely to where the format is going. My number 3 is Obstinate Baloth. So Obstinate Baloth is 2 colorless and 2 green. It's a creature type beast, a 4/4, which is fine. A 4/4 for 4, you'll take it. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. So, okay, that's a sweet deal. And here's where the sideboard aspect comes in. If a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Obstinate Baloth, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard. So this is really good against opposing Jund decks, decks that are playing Liliana of the Veil, where they're just like, whoop, tick it up, okay. And then you have yourself a free 4/4, and you've also gained some life too. You know, getting people to walk into this is always hilarious. And even if you don't necessarily want that aspect of it, you still have some cushion against the burn decks. You're still giving yourself a cushion of 4 life and a wall for them to have to charge into. It's just a body. It helps you smooth out your curve a little bit. If you don't think that you're going to make it to, your big ending spells like your death clouds, you just sort of turn into a beatdown deck. And this card can really, really help you do that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the exact spells used back in the day. This was released in 2010 for Magic 2011, so this was around the Scars block was a big block there, and then followed by the Innistrad block. So, because I recall this was definitely a force in Standard, and there were definitely times in Standard where you were just like reveal 2 Obstinate Baloths as your only options. You're like, well, I guess I'm just going to put that in play then. Tap with the dap, gain 4.
That did happen. Obstinate Baloth was my number 6, by the way.
Liliana of the Veil.
Liliana of the Veil is the
Yes.
main one, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
But also, when you have to discard to Hymn to Torok, or Wrench Mind, there were a couple, or Scepter of Fugue, there were a couple of effects that this in the older formats in particular, where it was more about attrition, where Obstinate Baloth really could take over.
But Liliana of the Veil was an amazing, until just recently when they broke it with Oko, was like the no question best planeswalker of all time. Yeah. So her +1, both players discard a card, were able to or is it minus? It's +1, isn't it?
+1, up to 4. Each player discards a card, and you would put in an Obstinate Baloth and then kill their Liliana.
That's right, as they should. Ding dang. All right, let's move on here to number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
Okay, this one's going to be your number 9. So this one is probably the best fair Magic card they've ever printed.
Oh boy.
It was all over the place in Standard, because that's where you play this card. And then doesn't do a whole lot elsewhere. I mean, I think you played in Nick Fit. You see it in the sideboard of Tron decks in Modern, but you don't see it in the Eternal formats. But for its time, for its day, Thrag Tusk was the card. It was the card. Thrag Tusk is 4 colorless and a green for a beast. It is a 5/3. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. When Thrag Tusk leaves the battlefield, create a 3/3 green beast creature token. Always carry 2 spears. This was originally from Magic 2013. You got another printing in Modern Masters. It's about $1.50 right now because you don't need them. But for its time, especially in those Abzan mid-range, Bant Control, Celestia, Jund kind of aggro mid-range mix-up decks, this was the card.
It really defined mid-range, and it really spoiled a lot of people too, because you got used to everything it provided you, where it was okay, I just have to get to 5 mana, and then I've stabilized. I've gained all of this life. I have this creature. I'll get another creature afterwards. And then after that, we got Courser of Kruphix. And so they almost had to wean us off of this style of play, and it almost seemed like they were trying to give it to us. And people got really used to that thing being there, that speed bump there. And then it wasn't there anymore, and people were a little bit lost of how am I gonna define mid-range? How am I gonna play my mid-range or my control deck? And so it's interesting how it really did change the game for a while there of, that play style and getting people used to that. And then when they didn't have it anymore, they didn't know what to do with themselves. And then Siege Rhino came along, so it felt like for a while we were getting that, and it was sort of the pinnacle of mid-range.
We were getting so much value. And then they had to print, starts with R and ends with Restoration Angel, because that card is stupid, and that interaction was ridiculous, and leaves the battlefield. Means if you blink it, you get a 3/3. When it enters the back, when it comes back, you gain 5 more life. So you'd have a 3/4 flyer and a 5/3 and a 3/3. It was ridiculous.
Yep,
that was ridiculous.
If you had a Tristani on the battlefield, you would gain 15.
Of course,
because you gain 5 from the Thrag Tusk, and then you gain life equal to all of the toughnesses, which are 3 from the Beast, 3 from the Thrag Tusk, and 4 from the Restoration Angel. And so those Abzan Reanimator mid-range mirror matches would take a forever,
forever. And this was like, I recall Thragtusk showing up in like weird random legacy decks. Just people weren't ready for a 5-mana 5/3 that came back.
It was in the sideboard of like Delver, of Teamer Delver decks for about half a minute because it didn't die to Abrupt Decay.
I was running it in Death Cloud because you could sacrifice it. So, when you play your Death Clouds, you're like, sacrifice 5 creatures. And you're like, okay. And you have a beast token and you beat him to death with the beast and gain some life out of it. It was glorious.
This was my number 3. So me and Ruben were right there on the,
there you go.
On the scale. Aaron, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that originally saw play in some of the earlier versions of Modern Dredge, because you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. And so I've been keeping up with Dredge for a while, and I remember when it started off as Lone Pox, when you were running like Zombie Infestation and Smallpox, and you were playing this really grindy engine with things like Raven's Crime and Flame Jab. And then Prized Amalgam came out, and people started to play a lot more with Bridge from Below. And we started seeing kind of the early glimpses of the Vengevine decks as we saw them. And this is the card that really got people excited as a way to sort of get bridge tokens and be able to play a really fair game in Dredge if you needed to. No one really plays it anymore, but I still remember it, and I have a great appreciation for it. My number 2 is Greater Gargadon. Nice. So Greater Gargadon is 9 colorless and a red for a 9/7 beast. Or you can suspend 10 for 1 red, and then sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land, remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon, and you can play this ability only if Greater Gargadon is suspended. So if you can play something silly and then you make a bunch of creatures, you can sacrifice them to this, and you have Bridge for Lows in the graveyard, you then get zombie tokens. If you're playing Walking Ballista, you can play Walking Ballista for 0, and then it triggers your bridges and you sacrifice your zombies. And so it allows you to play a fair-ish game to take advantage of graveyard interactions, and sometimes you might just get a 9/7 out of the deal. And so I was really happy to see this card when people were trying to figure out the way. The artwork on it is very interesting. You get to see almost the suspending type effect on it, when you look at the terrain in front of it and the terrain behind it. And so I will always just remember this card in terms of what people tried to do with it and how it helped.
This is my number 9.
There you go.
For 9/7. Okay.
It wasn't because I don't do that weird stuff that Ruben does.
You don't, but then
I
you just
really
did.
Don't. It just happens. Sometimes a cigar is just
Seems
a 9/7. All right, seriously. All I'm saying is that I have won one large Magic event in my life, and it was with Suicide Rakdos. I played Dark Confidant and Greater Gargadon in the same deck, and it was great. Yep. And I smashed everyone, and I got a Mox Pearl, and it was awesome.
Nice.
And Greater Gargadon is sweet with like Genju of the Spires and stuff. Like, man, that deck was awesome, and I loved it. And this card has just the place in my heart of an awesome beast that did really cool stuff.
I've played a lot of Greater Gargadon decks. Nowadays, I guess the place that you see it the most is things like Restore Balance, just as a free sacrifice outlet. During Time Spiral block, it was just a way to end games.
It was attrition.
It was just an attrition card. It's a good way to counter your opponent's lightning helixes. In certain circumstances, they don't gain the life anymore. And my favorite trick I've ever been able to pull off with Greater Gargadon is I had one in play and then another one suspended, and I attacked with the one in play. And then my opponent put a Temporal Isolation on it, which gave it shadow and didn't deal damage. My opponent declared no blocks. I put damage on the stack, and then I sacrificed the Gargadon.
No!
And since Temporal Isolation wasn't in play anymore, they took 9 damage and died. Because that's how magic worked, apparently. But yeah.
That's damage on the stack. We all miss it, don't we?
Greater Gargadon is super fun. Originally a reference to Lesser Gargadon, which was an uncommon from Prophecy, if I recall correctly.
Oh, good.
And Gargadon, another made-up beast word. Just exists.
It just sounds cool. Yeah. Lesser Gargadon, for those who spoiler alert, it sucks.
It's not good.
It's from Prophecy.
Yeah.
It's 2 red, 2 generic mana for a 6/4. 4 mana 6/4. Oh my goodness. But whenever it attacks or blocks, you sacrifice a land because it's Prophecy.
Oops.
And it hates you.
It's legal in Modern, reprinted in 8th edition.
Woohoo! Greater Gargadon, though, that was your best turn one play.
Yeah.
Was play a mountain, or you sometimes just shock yourself or whatever, and then suspend Gargadon, and that's just going to sit out there for the whole game. And if they screw up and put the shields down, you'll just sack all your lands and just get in for 9.
Yep.
Like I did that plenty of
Done that
times.
a ton. Yep.
I'm like, oh, are you tapped out? Okay, I'm going to kill your creature, sack my thing, hit the board, quah, and you're dead. And that's how I won that event. So for my number 2 here, I have a card that is it's a behemoth. It is a giant monster. It is a card that, like, people back when they first, like, previewed this card, I don't think they understood how crazy this thing is. And it wasn't until we got to see Brad Nelson take this thing to the absolute extremes and see this card's worth $40, for God's sake. To see Hoof, there it is on Crater Hoof Behemoth. It's 3 green mana and 5 generic more. So 8 mana for a 5/5 mythic beast with haste. And when Crater Hoof Behemoth enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. That's a lot of words.
I think you really have Legacy to thank for this, Spike. I mean, it's the staple of Legacy Elves. You know, you put a bunch of mana dorks into play. You have Natural Order, which is like Green Sun Zenith on speed. And you also get to run Green Sun Zenith if you want to. So you have many ways to tutor this thing out. All of those 1/1s become, threats that you have to answer. And you don't even need that many creatures to really make this a lethal force. There was even a time there for a minute where shortly after Force of Vigor came out, Vintage Dredge was running this as a dread return target, because we had, we were dealing with the Grave Troll ban, and so we needed to make sure we had enough green cards, and
Right.
We have access to dread return, and so if you want a way to make all of your zombies really, really big, and have something to pitch to Force of Vigor, you can also run this too. But really, when I think of this, I always think of Legacy and just making sure that the Elf deck cannot get the Behemoth, because once
Right.
they do, the game is over, and they can even just pay for it fairly if they want to. Like, they don't even have to necessarily go looking for it. They might draw it with their Glimpse of Nature,
Right.
and that deck is able to make a stupid amount of mana to just
If by
hardcast it.
fairly you mean tapping a Gaia's Cradle.
Right, but like a Gaia's Cradle, or just doing Heritage Druid things, or things
Sure.
like that. Quirion, Dryads, yeah.
Yeah, this card is just one of those that you ramp into, and like you just ask the question. You're like,
Right.
game over? We good here? Are we done? Slips
of
right over
course-
there. You good?
And of course, now we have Endray's Forerunners, which is the
Close, yeah.
the inspiration was Craterhoof Behemoth, but nothing will ever. I mean, they kept it to a reasonable. Everything just merely gets +2/+2 and kills all of you, as opposed to Craterhoof, where everything gets plus a zillion, and it's just overkill.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it also just wins the game. Where Forerunners, like, maybe possibly if you do something right, you won't
Right.
get completely smashed. But that's sort of like that's the cover band. That's the tribute band to the OG, the original, and it absolutely earns my number 2 spot. I think it's absolutely fantastic. Let's move on here to number 1. Ruben and I share a number 1. So, Aaron, what is yours?
My number 1 makes me so happy. I talked about, how my top 5 has some amount of competitive pedigree to them, and I kind of touched on how Greater Gargadon was in the earlier versions of Dredge. My number 1 oftentimes sees play in Manaless Dredge and Legacy as a dread return target, as a way to kind of keep the engine going. It's just so weird, and it's so cute. I also had it in the first version of my Sharoom, the Hegemon EDH deck, because if you're doing things from the graveyard, I can't even contain myself. It's so cute. I'm just looking at it right now. It makes me so happy to announce that my number 1 is River Kelpie.
Oh my god!
Nice.
It's fun to say too. River Kelpie. River Kelpie. So River Kelpie is 3 colorless and 2 blue. It's a creature type beast, originally from Shadowmoor, I believe. It's 3/3. Whenever River Kelpie or another permanent is put into play from a graveyard, draw a card. Whenever a spell is played from a graveyard, draw a card. And then it has Persist. So if this creature dies and is put into a graveyard, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to play with the -1/-1 counter on it. If you're playing anything like Muldrotha, if you're playing anything like Sharoom, you are going to be playing things from your graveyard, and you're also going to be returning permanents from your graveyard, including itself. So this very quickly can turn into a bit of an engine. It has Persist, so if you kill it, it's just going to come back. And it's just adorable. Like, it's just sitting there like, it's got the little mouth on its back with the little, it's just so cute. I just love it so much. And it's just everything I want to be doing. I'm always happy to play a River Kelpie. I need no excuse to play a River Kelpie. If you start off any sentence like, oh, hey, I think you should play a River Kelpie, I'm just going to do it. Like, you don't even need to finish the sentence. Like, done. I'll go ahead and get it out of my box and we can go ahead and do the thing. And so I love this card. I love it in Commander. I love that it was in one of my favorite decks of all time in Legacy. And so it just fills me with so much joy that it had to be my number one.
This one's another folklore beast.
Yeah.
From Scottish folklore.
Kelpies.
This is also a card that for the first 7-ish years of its life was worth about 50 cents or less. And then started to get a little creep, around the 2017s or so. And then one day, right around May 2018, I know this because I'm looking at MTG stocks, the price exploded and it went to like $9 a piece. And that price slowly went down. But once Commander 2019 included it, it's about $2.50, $2 or so. It was just a shortage based on how old Shadowmoor was and how many copies were out there. Not that this thing was... not this was game breaking or whatever, but casual players definitely love this card. It's super sweet. I'm glad they reprinted it. I'm having fun whenever I'm playing River Kelpie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to audible my number one because I know what your number one is.
Oh, I see how it is. Okay.
So I have two that were very close to my list that I'm in love with.
And you're just going to jump on the number one. Okay,
and I'm going to jump on my number one to let you have the number one that we would have tied on.
Okay.
Man, I gotta flip a coin here between these two. I'm gonna pick the one that I have the most history playing. Now, you all know I love it when cards win Pro Tours or when they're popular or when they're in the cube. But also, I like it when cards get other cards banned. And this card got a card restricted in Vintage and banned in Legacy.
Oh, God.
And I have a lot of history with playing Protean Hulk. And so I want to talk about Protean Hulk because I like this card.
Ridiculous.
Protean Hulk is a stupid beastie. It costs 5 colorless green. It's a 6/6 for a creature type beast. When Protean Hulk dies, search your library for any number of creature cards with total converted mana cost 6 or less and put them onto the battlefield. Then shuffle your library. Meat and eggs we eat. Borborygmos, originally from the Dissension expansion. This, of course, Hulk Flash, which took Grand Prix Columbus in 2007 by storm. Eventually won by Steve Sadin. Also, Gadiel's Lifer, one of his many, many top 8s, featured Hulk Flash. Basically, there's a card called Flash. That was a very old card, originally from Mirage, I want to say, and reprinted.
That's getting people upset again now.
Is it? Well, basically what you do is you would play Flash, you would put a Protean Hulk into play. Because you couldn't pay the rest of Protean Hulk's casting cost, as in the card Flash, you would sacrifice the Hulk and then do some shenanigans that would eventually kill your opponent. There were some initial ways that this would happen. One of them was you would search your library for 4 Disciple of the Vaults and a bunch of X casting cost artifact creatures.
Gross.
And then they would all die immediately and kill your opponent on Disciple of the Vault triggers. But eventually, the combo that was stumbled upon would be you need to get 6 total casting cost. So you would go get a Body Double, and you'd go get a Carrion Feeder.
Right,
Body
the number one zombie of all time.
Hulk.
Right,
yep, the number one zombie of all time. You would sacrifice the Body Double that was copying the Hulk, and then you'd go get a Karmic Guide and a Mog Fanatic. The Karmic Guide would bring back the Hulk. The Hulk would sacrifice again. You'd go get like a Body Snatcher or like a Kiki Jiki. I don't exactly know what you would do.
Body
at that
Double,
point.
I think.
But basically, you would get infinite Mog Fanatic triggers.
Yeah.
Or Death
Body
Cultist
Double
triggers.
Revelark.
Yes, Revelark was
yeah,
another
it's
one.
obnoxious.
Or like Kiki Jiki will let you go just copy, what was the Body Double or whatever? Like,
yes.
I don't know.
But yeah, so when I played the deck, I played a deck version called Bubble Hulk in Old Extended that used cards like Shifty Doppelganger and Footsteps of the Goryo to put the Protean Hulk into play. And yeah, it got ridiculous.
Goodness gracious. All right. Well, that card's weird and big and scary. This next one is small and is the card that just busted and broke standard in half. It is a card that didn't even have the type beast for years and years. Not until the first modern masters showed up did this card even have an actual factual creature type. And for some reason, they made a Pro Tour promo where it looks like a dog. And I don't know how I feel about that because all the other ones are just like big barrels of energy. And that's what you see when you have a format that has affinity. And I swear to God, according to Wizards, they just after like 1 week, like before the release of Darksteel, someone said, "Hey, have you tried Arcbound Ravager in affinity?" And they hadn't until that very moment. Arcbound Ravager is a 2 generic mana rare beast originally from Darksteel, and it is a 0/0 that has a few abilities: sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it comes with modular 1. Because it's a 0/0, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. When it dies, you may put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. So this card, with damage on the stack even, did some stupidly ridiculous things with counters and sacrificing and triggers from Disciple of the Vault and just manipulating every single, like the artifact lands that fed it as well, moving the counters around. Like this is a monster force it wasn't standard and later it wasn't extended. Well, that was a thing. And then we have modern, which is a thing.
Banned in block as well.
Like you didn't want anything to do with Ravager after a while in standard. It got to be absolutely miserable. Like the amount of players that were shed because this card existed was ridiculous. It took them like a decade to fix what Arcbound Ravager broke.
And has gone on to have an impressive career in other formats. It was the backbone of Modern Affinity, and then Hardened Scales came out. And so, you would think of, the fact that you can double all of the counters. Things got really, really ridiculous then. It changes combat math. The fact that, any creature can suddenly become this lethal force. And then Walking Ballista came out. And so you don't even necessarily need to go to combat. You can hit them with your Ballista, or you can just turn your Walking Ballista into a machine gun and kill them. Kill them with your +1/+1 counters. Turning your Blink Moth Nexuses, your Ink Moth Nexuses, everything can become a lethal creature. I don't think it really sees play in Legacy, but also in Vintage. It's very pillar of the Workshops deck. The fact that you can run this out very quickly, sacrifice all of your Moxen. You can run out these prison pieces like your Spheres or your Thorns and then sacrifice them when you don't need them anymore, and then turn that into a win condition. And so just a very, very lethal card. I think of it in terms of graveyard decks, where my first modern deck was Living End. And so I'll never forget the horrified feeling that I felt when I went to cast Living End, and all of a sudden I went to sacrifice everything, and I went to go do Living, and they were like, "Okay, cool, I'll come with you." And I was like, wait, no, what are you doing? And they're like, "No, I want some of this too." And then they're like, "Whoop, whoop, whoop, whoop."
Right.
But I also know how good it felt to get them, because sometimes you would get the affinity players that didn't really know what's going on. And so they would sacrifice everything prematurely, and that's a May. So you would go, whoop, whoop, whoop. You're like, "I don't want to cast this now." And they'd be like, "But I just sacrificed my whole board." And I'm like, "I know, doesn't that suck?" And then let's just have a board wipe,
That's too bad. Yeah.
Gosh,
Darn.
is that what you did?
Yes.
Board sacker.
And then it exiles your bridges, which is terrible.
Yeah.
You're just like, "Please don't figure it out. Please don't figure it out."
Right.
Ravager just doesn't do anything. First of all, like Wizards of the Coast, it took them many, many years, I feel, to really respect the free sack outlet.
Yeah.
The ability to sacrifice something for free over and over was absolutely not respected, and I feel this is the type of card that really taught that lesson. You can't just slap a free sacrifice and expect it to be okay. Lord God, and particularly in the format they made it, I just the whole story of Mirrodin is just like, really serious. What? Why did you do that?
Oops.
It's just a big oof most of the time, and it taught a whole bunch of lessons.
Oof, so you can
collectively oof together. And that is our top 10 beasts. You'll see them on the screen right now if you review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben. Oh, God.
Are you Cardi B? What is that? It's supposed to be...
We are grown adults. Oh, my God.
just let the Wookiee win.
I want to thank our sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc., our co-sponsor, cardhoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Camel and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening, and I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at magicmicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at magicmicspodcast.libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes or Spotify. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.